On behalf of the Cedar and Sequoia investigators, I have the honor for presenting for the first time the 2-year results for Abicipar for neovascular age-related macular degeneration. My relevant financial disclosures is that I've served as a consultant and received grant support from Allergan. Designed ankyrin repeat proteins, or DARPins, represent a novel class of protein therapeutics. They allow for the generation of small molecules with high binding affinities. Abicipar PEGAL is a clear reflection of that. In comparison to ranibizumab, that has a smaller molecular weight, but a 90-fold higher binding affinity and a longer half-life. Cedar and Sequoia were 2 global phase 3 randomized, double-masked clinical trials with identical protocols. Patients were randomized to receive Abicipar every 8 weeks after 3 loading doses, Abicipar every 12 weeks after 2 loading doses, or ranibizumab every 4 weeks. It's important to emphasize the treatment regimen was not modified once the study was started, and patients remained in the Q8 arm or the Q12 arm through the 2-year study. The primary endpoint was at week 52, and today we'll go over the results in the second year from weeks 52 to week 104. Over 1,800 patients were enrolled and randomized into one of the 3 treatment arms. At the end of 2 years, nearly 70% of the patients completed the Abicipar-treated arms, and 82% treated the ranibizumab-treated arms. Abicipar met its primary endpoint at week 52. 96% of patients treated with Abicipar every 8 weeks, and 94% of patients treated with every 12 weeks had stable vision. These gains were maintained through the second year. 93% of patients treated with Abicipar every 8 weeks, or 6 injections in the second year, had stable vision. 90% treated with Abicipar every 12 weeks, or 4 injections in the second year, had stable vision. And 94% of patients treated with ranibizumab every 4 weeks, or 12 injections, had stable vision. The best corrected visual acuity improvements seen after the initial doses were maintained from week 52 to week 104. 7.8 letters were gained with Abicipar every 8 weeks, or 6 injections in the second year. 6.1 letters were gained with Abicipar every 12 weeks, or 4 injections in the second year. And finally, 8.5 letters were gained with ranibizumab, or 12 injections in the second year. When we looked at the difference from weeks 52 to week 104, you can see the visual gains were maintained. There was a loss of 1.1 letters in the Abicipar every 8 weeks, a loss of 1.3 letters with Abicipar every 12 weeks, and a loss of 1.0 letters with ranibizumab every 4 weeks. When we looked at the retinal anatomy, we can see the improvements for baseline were maintained from week 52 to week 104. There was a decrease of 147 microns in the Abicipar every 8 weeks. There was a decrease of 146 microns in the Abicipar every 12 weeks, and a decrease of 142 microns in the ranibizumab every 4 weeks. In the Abicipar-treated arms, you can see there were some slight variations in the retinal thickness. These measured in the second year about 20 microns. When we looked at the safety through week 104, the overall rate of treatment-emergent adverse events were similar between all 3 treatment arms, in both ocular and non-ocular. However, when we looked at the ocular study procedure-related events, there was a higher rate in the Abicipar-treated arms than the ranibizumab-treated arms. And this was driven in the first year by the higher rate of intraocular inflammation. When we looked at the intraocular inflammation from week 52 to week 104, you can see that the inflammation rate was 0.8% in the Abicipar every 8 weeks, 2.3% in the Abicipar every 12 weeks, and 1% in the ranibizumab every 4 weeks. There were no new cases of retinal vasculitis nor endophthalmitis observed in the second year. When we looked at the rate of intraocular inflammation through the whole study from years 0 to year 2, you can see the risk was greatest in the first 12 weeks in year 1, where the incidence was nearly 3% in the first 3 months, and it was 0.21% in the second year. In summary, the visual gains achieved by the end of the first treatment year were effectively maintained with 4 injections of Abicipar as compared with 12 injections of ranibizumab during the second year. The improvements in visual acuity and retinal thickness were maintained through week 104 and were similar on the Abicipar every 12 weeks versus the ranibizumab every 4 weeks, 10 injections over 2 years versus 25 injections. The overall incidence of treatment-emergent adverse events at the end of the second year were comparable between treatment groups, and the rate of intraocular inflammation was comparable between treatment groups during the second year. On behalf of Allergan and myself, I want to thank the principal investigators, many of them in the audience today. the patients, and the families at the 224 clinical sites in over 33 countries in the CEDAR and Sequoia studies. Thank you.